Ukraine's forces are gathering to defend Donetsk. They're taking up new defensive lines in the region where they still control major cities. Many residents are evacuating. The city of Slovyansk came under shelling again overnight. Russian missiles have destroyed homes and killed several people in recent days. A resident of Lysychansk says the city doesn't even exist anymore.
The streets of Lysychansk have fallen quiet, but the wreckage is everywhere. The capture of the city means that all of the Luhansk region is now in Russian hands, an objective that Moscow has coveted since the war began in February. Ukrainian military commanders ordered their forces to pull back, rather than attempting to hold the city. For the exhausted soldiers who retreated, Russia's artillery advantage proved overwhelming.
There's at least 5 times more Russian artillery here than what we have, or even up to 10 times more. Daily, we pinpoint up to 169 enemy positions that are active all at the same time.
Ukrainian forces have retreated to the Donetsk region, which along with Luhansk makes up the wider Donbas. Here, they have been reinforcing defensive positions for months. But Russian forces have already turned their eye towards the Donetsk region, particularly the major cities of Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. Slovyansk has been bombarded for over a week now, leaving many residents with little options but to evacuate.
I returned to the city literally for 2 days to pick up my things, and now this. Now we're trying to take everything we have and to leave, because life here has become scary. We only had time to evacuate the children.
I don't know. I think it's only going to get worse. I don't even know. I'm already thinking about leaving. It would be wise not to expect things to get better.
Those who stay behind are bracing for the worst, as the front line creeps ever closer.
Emmanuel Chas is following developments for us from the capital, Kyiv. Emmanuel, tell us, with the battle being taken to the Donetsk region, how's that going to look?
Well, Ben, it's going to be another fierce fighting that has been ongoing since the very beginning of the war. Russia's eyes were set on the entirety of Donbas, and even if it has now claimed victory over Luhansk, what victory is it, as every city is transformed into rubble? So we can expect more shelling happening in Donetsk, while the Ukrainian armed forces still have formed a vast area, still hold a vast area where they are resisting the Russian invasion. We can just expect more shelling, as has been the case in Luhansk, more shelling over Slovyansk. It has already been a week there, more shelling over Kramatorsk, over Bakhmut, all the big cities that still haven't fallen into the Russian army's hands. Can expect very dark hours indeed. We've seen for people there, the situation is very dire, with thousands of people who still hadn't evacuated, who are now trapped in those cities under constant shelling.
Now, it may not be the case in the south of the country, but in the east, momentum is on the Russians' side. How is that affecting morale on the Ukrainian side?
Well, of course, this is a blow to the morale of all Ukrainians to see the developments in the eastern region. You have to keep in mind that the cities we are mentioning, those are cities where most people who could afford it, who were mobile enough to do so, already left in front of the advance of Russian troops. The only people who remain there are the people who didn't have any choice, and you can see that they live in very dire conditions. There's no running water sometimes. There's no electricity, no way to communicate with the outside world, with the rest of Ukraine. So, of course, the morale of Ukrainians is dampened by that, but also it has received a boost of late. You were mentioning the south of the country. Well, in southern Ukraine, the Ukrainian armed forces have made significant gains. They have launched counter-offensives around Kherson, around Mykolaiv, and I think that's where all eyes are set right now how this counteroffensive will look like in the next few days, the next few weeks.
Imam Shah's reporting for us from Kiev. Thank you. I'm joined now by Defence Policy Analyst Gustav Gressel of the European Council on Foreign Relations. We heard our correspondent there, Russian forces making gains in the east while Ukraine is launching counterattacks in the southeast. Who is gaining the upper hand in the war right now?
Well, for the time being, by and large, Russia still enjoys the initiative. That is by material superiority, particularly on artillery, but also in tanks and firepower. They have the initiative in the Donbas. They have the initiative in the Kherson, in Kharkiv Oblast still. The Ukrainians are trying actually since 3 weeks to regain the initiative or to retake territory in southern Kherson, where they are fighting against the clock of occupation, Russia installing an occupation regime there. But the problem is, although they made considerable gains, they are still insufficient in numbers and firepower to really decisively break the Russian defensive lines.
So is that the problem? Time and again, Ukraine just doesn't have what it takes to launch a proper counterattack?
For Ukraine, the problem is they have the soldiers to fight. They have volunteers. They have undergone full mobilization. The problem is they don't have arms to do so. They lack tanks, direct fire support. They lack the armored mobility, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and they are short of artillery. Russia, on the other hand, has plenty of firepower, but they're lacking the soldiers. That's why for them it was so hard to take cities like Severodonetsk, where they need to send infantry into the buildings to clear them, which is difficult for them. So the big question in Kiev is obviously, will the West step in and provide weapons at a higher pace to allow Ukraine to equip some of these mobilized forces, some of these new forces, with also heavy weapons, mechanized formations, and to still continue to maintain its armored brigades and its mechanized reserves. That will be critical, and we'll see whether that goes. Unfortunately, so far the West has delivered good quality, but not the sufficient quantity needed to fight this war.
Okay, so more weapons, better weapons and quicker. Can either side really win this war, though, in your opinion? Are we looking at another frozen conflict developing here?
The Ukraine still has the chance to actually beat the Russians and push them back behind lines. Well, then it's of course a matter how many casualties Ukrainians would want to sacrifice if they really want to push, for example, behind lines that were held by the Russians before February 24th. But it's still possible. This is still an open-end game. What I would dearly advise Western governments, particularly the US, but also the Europeans, is to beware that a stalemate, a frozen conflict, where a front cuts through Ukraine in half, and would make the sustainability, the economic sustainability, very doubtful for Ukraine as such. I mean, we had a ceasefire after Minsk, and it was just a pause on the war for 8 years. If we have a similar arrangement now, people will wonder, is this just a pause? They will not come back. The refugees will not come back. Investors will not come back. People will be hesitant to invest their money. People will be hesitant to engage in projects there because they don't know when will Russia relaunch this. So for the sake of self-sustainability and the West not having to subsidize Ukraine for the decades to come, it would be good if the Ukrainians would at least have a partial victory in terms of regaining sizable portions and decisively defeating, at least in one operational direction, the Russian forces, so that the kind of offensive spirit in Moscow is broken.
You heard it from military analyst Gustav Gressel from the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot.